Wow. Right? What a condemnation. Christ condemns, in his speech, condemns and corrects the disciples. What is it that you don't understand? Right? He even recounts, you saw me feed 5,000. You saw me feed 4,000. You saw me do all these miracles, one after another. And we get in this boat, and here you are with one loaf of bread, right? And you're back to the same place of worrying about how are we going to eat. And Christ says, what is it that you do not understand about this scenario? I think it's an amazing thing that Mark takes us from, like, through these incidents where bread is needed in all of those scenarios, right? And what I think is interesting is the final one, it's the disciples that are hungry. Right? In the first two, the crowd was hungry. Now the disciples are hungry. You know, how are you going to feed those men? How would we feed these people in this wilderness? How would that happen? Now it's, well, how are you going to feed us? Okay? And Christ comes and he condemns them. There's a couple of lessons that I want to apply, or a couple of applications I want to make from this reading of this setting that we have. That the disciples, in chapter 8, it says that he asks them, what is it that you don't understand? And what happened was they were operating under a principle, right, of essentially always returning to zero. Every time a miracle happened, they would be buoyed in their faith, and they would just go, this is amazing. I can't believe that this is happening. This is unbelievable to see this. It says, like, they were amazed and wondered. I mean, they were just like, I cannot even, this is crazy. And literally the next day, they'd be like, oh no, how are we going to do this? Right? They were always operating from a baseline of zero, always. Zero faith, all the time. And this illustration, sort of these stories here, talk about how they never took an incident, right, and grew from it. And then they grew from it. And they grew from it, right? Like, they never took a thing that God did for them, that Jesus did for them, and said, you know, this could happen more. If that's what God did for me today, then he could do that for me tomorrow. And, I mean, I think we all sort of operate that way, don't we? Human nature kind of is that way. We look in our lives and we say, you know, God's provided for me, you know, this time, and, you know, we've had these challenges, and I can look and say, God did something there for me that's undeniably like his hand. And then when the minute the next thing arises, it's like, oh no, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? How are we going to do this? What are we going to do? Right? We all do that. Like, I mean, literally, all of us operate the same way. Okay? And I think what the Lord is saying is he's calling that out in the disciples. He's saying, you should not be continuing to stay at the same place. It's not acceptable. You need to use that and grow. Unbelief affects our hearts and affects our Christian walk and affects our prayer and affects, right, all of these areas of our life. We all come back to zero. And when that happens, Jesus looks at us and he says, what is it that you don't understand? So here's the path forward. Something that you need to do is you need to meditate on the ways that God has been good to you and has provided for you. And either write them down or, you know, make a mental note of them, whatever it is that works for you. But you really need to think about that and document it in a way that when a trial comes into your life, you don't immediately run to zero, right? But rather you can go back and say, okay, where's my piece of paper? All right, I'm going to read this now, right? God did this, and he did this, and he did this for me, and he did this for me. Right? God did this, right? And what it does is it buoys your faith.